There is a vote coming this November 2026 that could be one of the biggest changes to property taxes in Florida in decades. And if you own a home here in Port St Lucie or even thinking about buying one, this affects you directly. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what is being proposed, the good and the bad, and why the timing of your purchase could end up saving you or costing you thousands of dollars over the next few years. By the way, my name is Anthony Musso. I have been living in Port St Lucie for over 20 years. I am a homeowner here myself, and I also work in law enforcement. So this topic actually hits close to home for me on two different levels, as someone who pays a property tax bill every single year, and as someone whose second profession is funded in part by those same tax dollars. I will get into exactly what that means in a few minutes. But first, I have a question for you. Say the answer out loud to yourself. Are you living in your ideal home right now? If your answer is no, I would love to have a conversation with you. My contact info is on the screen and in the description below. Your ideal home might be just a phone call away. So what is actually on the ballot for November? So here's what is on the table. In June, the Florida legislature passed a proposal headed to the November ballot. It is officially HJR 1F, and it has been nicknamed the expansion of the Save Our Homes protections. For it to become law, it needs 60% voter approval. That is a high bar, a true supermajority. Here's what it would do. Right now, the Homestead exemption, the portion of your home's assessed value that is protected from non-school property taxes, sits at about $50,000. If this passes, that jumps to $150,000 starting in January of 2027. Then 1 year later, on January 1st, 2028, it climbs again to $250,000. What does that mean in plain terms? For a lot of homesteaded homeowners, this could reduce your non-school property tax bill to close to zero. And importantly, school funding is carved out and protected. This proposal does not touch the tax dollars that goes to our schools. Sounds great so far, right? Let's talk about why it is more complicated than that. Let's start with the positives, and there are some real ones here. Number one, real meaningful savings. For the average homesteaded homeowner in Port St Lucie, going from $50,000 exemption to a $250,000 exemption is not a small adjustment. It is potentially the difference between a real property tax bill and almost nothing on the non-school portion. At a time when insurance premiums have gone through the roof and HOA and CDD fees keep climbing, this is one of the only places where homeowners could actually see their costs go down instead of up. Number two, education funding stays protected. One of the biggest fears with a proposal like this is always, does this affect our schools? And the answer here is no. The exemption applies only to non-school levies. This was a deliberate choice by the legislature, and it addresses one of the most common objections head on. Number three, more predictability for non-homesteaded property owners too. This proposal also lowers the annual assessment cap on non-homesteaded properties like rental properties, second homes, and commercial properties from 10% down to 5%. For investors and landlords, that means fewer big swings and a more predictable tax increase year after year. Number four, if you buy and establish your homestead here by December 31st, 2026, you are grandfathered in for the full benefit, no waiting period, once it phases in. I will come back to this because this is a big deal. If you are on the fence about buying this year versus next year, this is going to be extremely important to you. Number five, for the bigger picture, this is a strong long-term affordability story for Florida and for Port St Lucie specifically. For people relocating here from high-tax states, lower ongoing property tax costs could make the math of moving here even more attractive, even as other costs of living have crept up. Now let's talk about the concerns, because there are some real ones, and I want to be straight with you about them. Number one, that 60% threshold is no guarantee. Plenty of ballot proposals with broad public support still fail to clear a supermajority, so nothing here is a done deal. Number two, there is a new residency requirement that creates a real gap between buyers. If you establish your Florida homestead after January 1st, 2027, you could have to wait, by some estimates, up to 4 or 5 years before you qualify for that full $250,000 exemption. So 2 neighbors in nearly identical homes could end up with very different tax bills for years, simply based on which side of January 1st they closed on. Number 3, and this is the one I want to spend the most time on because of where I sit professionally, the impact on local government funding, specifically police and fire. Here's how it works. Those non-school property taxes do not just disappear into thin air. They fund city and county general funds, and a huge piece of those general funds goes towards the police departments and fire departments. Salaries, equipment, vehicles, staffing levels, training, station maintenance, all of it. If a large share of residential property gets pulled out of the taxable base because the exemption jumps from $50,000 to $250,000, that is a significant reduction in revenue for cities and counties across Florida, including right here in St. Lucie County and Port St Lucie. The smaller cities and counties in Florida will be more affected than the larger ones. So what happens next? Local governments generally have a few options. They can raise the millage rate on what is left in the tax base, meaning commercial properties, rental properties, and non-homesteaded owners could see their rates go up to help cover that gap. They can look at new revenue sources like special fire assessment fees, which some counties are already seeing. Or if neither of those happens, departments may face hiring freezes, slower equipment replacement cycles, or delays in opening new stations as the city continues to grow. I say this is someone who wears both hats. As a homeowner, I want my tax bill to go down. Nobody's going to argue with that. But as someone in law enforcement, I also know firsthand what it takes to keep response times fast and departments fully staffed as a city like Port St Lucie continues to grow as quickly as it has. This is not a simple yes or no issue, and anyone who tells you it isn't giving you the full picture. Number 4, there is no immediate relief here. Even if this passes in November, nothing changes for the 2026 tax year. The first increase does not kick in until January 1st, 2027, and the full $250,000 exemption is not in place until January 1st, 2028. So this is a multi-year phase-in, not an overnight fix. Number 5, the burden doesn't just vanish, it shifts. Non-homesteaded owners, that includes snowbirds, investors, and landlords, could end up absorbing a disproportionate share of whatever gap is left. If landlords are paying more, that cost has a way of finding its way into rent. So even renters in Port St Lucie have a stake in how this plays out. So here's the part I think matters most if you are actively considering a move to Port St Lucie. If you close on a home and establish it as your permanent Florida residence, your homestead, on or before December 31st, 2026, and this proposal passes, you are immediately eligible for the full expanded exemption as it phases in. No waiting period. You ride the wave from $50,000 all the way up to $150,000 and then to $250,000, right alongside everyone who already lives here and is homesteaded. But if you establish your homestead in 2027 or later, you are looking at a multi-year wait, possibly 4 to 5 years, before you get that same full benefit. But if you establish your homestead in 2027 or later, you are looking at a multi-year wait, possibly 4 to 5 years, before you get that same full benefit. 2 buyers, same neighborhood, same price point, same size home. And for years, one of them is paying a meaningfully higher non-school property tax bill than the other, purely based on a closing date. That is not me trying to create urgency for the sake of it. That is simply how the proposal, as written, currently works. If you are already planning to make this move in the next year or two, doing it before the end of 2026 is worth seriously considering, regardless of how the vote turns out. Because if it passes, the difference is real money year after year. Look, whatever way you lean on this, I think every homeowner and every future homeowner in Port St Lucie should understand what is actually on the ballot this November. Not just the headline version. I will keep you updated as we get closer to the vote and as more details come out. If you are thinking about making your move to Port St Lucie, hit subscribe because I cover topics like this every week. And if you want to talk through your specific timeline, my contact information is on the screen and in the description. And whether it is next month or by the end of this year, let's make sure you are making this move with the full picture in front of you.